There's $1 million up for grabs on Saturday, 2-game slate, the final week of the NFL regular season, and we're going to show you how to attack it and how to try and win that $1 million Rooskies, fellas, right now. Let's start at the quarterback position where you only have 4 options, and it is pretty dang important right away to focus in on the situations where teams are playing for something. And in this situation, yeah, you have some teams. The Chiefs trying to play for the 1 seed. Dallas and Philly vying for playoff position, and Mike McCarthy already said Dallas is going to play their guys. Jalen Hurts, all they can do is move up in the wild card, but hey, maybe they're going to try and get revenge for getting smacked earlier in the season. And Drew Lock is expected to start. They've kind of already named him the starter this week. They're not playing for anything right now. And we'll see as the week goes on. We'll have a Saturday morning live stream to see if there's anything in terms of major pieces being out. Some guys on the COVID list for Philly, but for the most part, I'm expecting both these teams to be approaching this final game of the year as if it's a normal game and go full on in it. So with that being said here, we'll start up top with Patrick Mahomes, who's $7,500, who projects out for me as the highest projected quarterback on the slate right now, but there's a big difference here. He's projected out by the highest by about a point though, right? He's not that far of a gap off, and the price point is pretty significant here of $700, of $1,000+ off of a Jalen Hurts. And Mahomes does have the highest team total on the slate at 27, but you've only seen Mahomes throw more than 35 times once in the last month and a half. You've only seen him cross the 300-yard bonus once in the last 2 months, and it's because these teams, and you saw it with the Bengals last week, and you're going to see it with Denver like they did earlier this year where they held Mahomes to 184 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, a pick, and only 13.6 fantasy points. Denver's going to run the 2 high safeties. Vic Fangio, the man just started this defense for the most part. They're going to run the 2 high safeties. They're going to take away the big plays to a Tyreek Hill, and they're probably going to give the Chiefs some trouble. But the big thing for the Chiefs lately is they've just halted their turnovers, like you saw in the Bengals game. They've halted their turnovers, and they've been more willing to run the ball. Darrell Williams looking really good out there last week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire heading into this week, they say there's a chance he will play, which seems closer to questionable/doubtful than questionable/probable, right? So they've been more reluctant to, or they've been more willing to hand the ball off. And when they do that, Mahomes can't put up these massive games. So Mahomes, for me, he's in play. It's a 2-game slate with the best quarterback in the league, but he's not a strong priority. These next 2 games, this game environment of Dallas versus Philly is what stands out a little bit more. Dak Prescott with a 24.5-point team implied total right now. And boy, oh boy, is this Cowboys offense hot and cold. But even last time out, Dak Prescott in a game where their offense went somewhat cold, he's still throwing the ball 38 times. He still goes for 23 DraftKings points. He was the number 5 quarterback on the week last week in a lot of low-scoring games. Very quietly a 3-touchdown game. Only 226 passing yards, but he just went over the 300-yard bonus versus Washington. So fantasy-wise, yeah, they're continuing to throw the ball, right? They're playing from behind in that game. In this game, they should play from ahead. In a game in Philadelphia, a rematch of Week 3 when Dak goes off for 20.1 fantasy points. Basically doesn't play much of the fourth quarter in that one as it was mainly a blowout. Dak Prescott is going to stand out for me here as a yes. I like this $6,000 range at quarterback. And whether you want to play it with a unique build that we can get to as we go through the slate of stacking Dak with 3 of his pass catchers like we mentioned on other 2-game slates in the past, it's a unique way to approach it. Stacking Dak with just Zeke and Dalton Schultz and not touching the wide receivers, a unique way to approach this slate by playing who is likely to be one of the more popular quarterbacks, but building it in a unique way where people won't go to that. And another unique build approach would be Jalen Hurts. And by the way, I have Dak and Jalen Hurts for a very similar projection here, and they're only like a point behind Mahomes. So projection-wise, it's looking pretty good. And Jalen Hurts, you get a nice price discount of $500 off of Dak and $1,200 off of Mahomes. But Jalen Hurts at $6,300, look, Jalen Hurts is going to be looking good, right? He doesn't have a lot of his running backs right now. Miles Sanders doubtful. Jordan Howard is on the COVID list, and so is Boston Scott. You saw Jalen Hurts take off a little bit more in that past game running the ball. He only had 13 fantasy points, and here's the thing with Jalen Hurts. He's going to have to do it on the ground. He's going to have to get in with a rushing touchdown on the ground because in games where he's not scoring a rushing touchdown, he hasn't cleared 20 DraftKings points this season since week 7 when he doesn't have a rushing touchdown. He's just not getting 300-yard bonuses. The only time he's had a 300-yard bonus was all the way back in week 4 against Kansas City and week 3 playing from behind for the whole second half against this Dallas team, and it took him the whole final drive picking up like 70 yards to get there. So if you're looking for security at the quarterback, it's probably Dak Prescott. Like, you're looking for a dude to throw 35 times in this game, at the very minimum 30 times. It's probably still going to be more than Jalen Hurts is going to throw, similar to Mahomes and what he's going to throw as they probably run the ball a little bit more in this game. I probably lean to Dak Prescott, but there are very unique ways to build, and it's going to keep Jalen Hurts strongly in play for me. Unique ways to build would be to say, hey, Dallas Goddard's on the COVID list. We'll see if he's able to return. We'll talk on that on the Saturday morning live stream. But if you just play Jalen Hurts with no Eagles pass catchers and you just stack it by running back Dallas on the opposite side? Because if he did that back in week 3 when Jalen Hurts was playing from behind and Jalen Hurts goes out there and he puts up 25.5 fantasy points and you just stacked him with nobody because all the production is, in that game specifically, you didn't really see any production for Devonta Smith, nothing crazy for the Quez Watkins or the Jalen Ragers. If you just said, hey, I'll play Jalen Hurts and I'll play the onslaught on the other side. I'll play Zeke, CeeDee Lamb, and Dalton Schultz and just say that the Cowboys put up 30 points and playing from behind the whole game, Hurts gets me to 20 to 25 and barely outscores Dak. I think that's the second unique way to build on this slate from a stacking perspective. Run a Jalen Hurts naked. If you want to put Devonta Smith in there, fine. I don't hate it. But run a Jalen Hurts naked with none of his players from his entire team and then run it back with 3 Cowboys on the opposite side or play Dak Prescott and just triple stack a Dak Prescott build. In terms of Drew Lock, I'm not interested. I know he's cheap, but I think we can find money elsewhere on this slate. I'm just not interested. It's as simple as that. Not really doing much for me, Drew Lock. So now with all that being said, let's slide into the running back position now, the beautiful people out there. And the running back position is going to be a little bit murky as of right now. I mean, we're not going to be seeing Miles Sanders. More than likely, he's doubtful. We have Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's pictured in red right now on the screen because Clyde Edwards-Helaire is heading into this week with a quote-unquote chance to play. So I'm leaning right now that he's not playing. I took him out of the projections for now. We have Jordan Howard and also Boston Scott on the COVID list. They got put on it Monday. There's a chance they can return. The fact that this game's on a Saturday instead of a Sunday, though, makes it a little bit more difficult, but we shall see as the week goes on. I currently have those guys projected out. So really, the way that I'm looking at this slate right now is I'm looking at it from a standpoint of we don't have many options here, right? We're down a couple running backs in some of these backfields. You're looking at it on a 2-game slate to begin with, and the way that I'm looking at this is, okay, we have Zeke up top at $6,700. I'm going to be interested in Zeke because, look, he's cheap, he's affordable, he's a 7-point favorite with a nice team total. Last time out against Philadelphia was arguably his best game on the entire season. Ezekiel Elliott, he grades out as the highest projected running back. Actually, he's kind of tied for the highest projected running back with a guy who's below $6,000, so money signs start to go off there for us. But Zeke, he's in play. He makes a unique build if you stack him with his quarterback Dak and a Dallas onslaught. Right now, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's not going to be in play for me. Even if he returns, I expect a limited basis. You're going to the playoffs. Why force him back, in my opinion? But then you get to this interesting range where you have these Denver running backs in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon. And these dudes, there's no way to parse them, separate them, right? You have Melvin Gordon starting the games and then starting the second half. So he kind of gets a little bit of a snap bonus most weeks, but he's getting like 55% of the snaps to Javonte's 48% of the snaps. Like these last couple of games, Javonte Williams has played 49% and 49% of the snaps. He's had overall opportunities by 9 opportunities and 15 opportunities over the last 2 games, whereas Melvin Gordon on the opposite side, 54%, 49% of the snaps. He's seen in those games 8 opportunities and 14 opportunities. Like this is split right down the middle. So basically what you're playing for here between Melvin Gordon and they're underdogs in this one. They only have a 17-team implied total. Probably won't be in the red zone that often with Drew Lock on their center. So what you're playing for right here is a situation where like who scores the touchdown. And it's just a guessing game. Like you can try and guess and see which one of these guys ends up in the winning lineup. They're going to remain in play, both Melvin Gordon and a Javonte Williams. Melvin Gordon's cheaper and he's probably going to play 5 to 6% more snaps, but for the most part, the touches are going to be split right down the middle. They probably see 10 opportunities apiece in this game. Which one breaks the long touchdown? They both done that this year. Which one gets a couple of catches? They both have games like that this year. There's really no way to parse between them. I have right now Javonte Williams for 10.5 fantasy points and Melvin Gordon for 10 fantasy points. So it's a big shrug emoji and you just kind of pick one of them to get different. I think Melvin Gordon will be lower owned if you want to. They're not strong priorities for me though. I would prefer the guys around them. Tony Pollard is only in play in large field GPPs. Tony Pollard should touch the ball in this game to end the season, probably somewhere around a dozen times in my opinion. It keeps him in play. I probably like him more than the Denver guys because I think there's a little bit of later upside if they were to rest Zeke if the game got out of hand versus Philly, as we've seen them do in the past. So I prefer Pollard to a Javonte and to a Darrell or to a Melvin Gordon, but the best player on this range and the best running back on the slate, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire indeed does not go, is Darrell Williams. Darrell Williams on the team that is a 10-point favorite, on the highest team total at 27 on the slate, and Darrell Williams who's coming off of a game where they just said, yeah, we're not going to give the ball in a game that we actually care about against Cincinnati and that matters, trying to go for the 1 seed. We're not going to give the ball to Derek Gore. And now this game as well matters. If they win and they get Tennessee to lose, although not expected as double-digit favorites Tennessee, but if that were to happen, you'll end up seeing Kansas City try and fight for that number 1 seed, and if that the Bengals lose and some other things go on. But Darrell Williams played 86% of the snaps against Cincy. Derek Gore only played 12% of the snaps. He ended up seeing in that game 3 red zone opportunities. He ended up having over 100 total yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had success running the ball. And they're going to have to run the ball in this one. So if Darrell Williams is the only active back with a Derek Gore, and that's about it out there in that backfield, maybe a Jerick McKinnon, either way, it's the Darrell Williams show. And because of that, I'm not really interested in Derek Gore. The only other guy to talk about on this slate, if, and this is a big if, Boston Scott and Howard were to both miss, or one of them was to miss, it brings in play Kenny Gainwell, the rookie. Kenny Gainwell, who look, he was solid, right? He took all of last year off in college. When you've seen him this year, he kind of comes in on these like sprinkled in touches, but he's actually been active lately, so that's good to see. He was active last week and had a first down for them, a pretty decent first down and big first down in that game. So it's a doubtful Miles Sanders. If these guys were to to play, I prefer Boston Scott. They utilized him as an RB1 last week. That's the way to go. I would prefer Boston Scott probably over everybody but Darrell Williams on the slate at the running back position. But if he's out, you got 13% of the snaps last week for a Kenny Gainwell. He ended up picking up that big first down on his only touch for them. But in games where guys have been out this year, we've seen Kenny Gainwell play 50% of the snaps. We've seen him play 40% of the snaps. And now everybody could potentially be out. So Kenny Gainwell at $4,100 will also be in play if, and it's a big if, these other running backs are not in. If they are in, then go right to Boston Scott. And then guys to mention, Jason Huntley, former Detroit Lion. He's on the practice squad, could be elevated if the other guys miss. Don't expect much, maybe a couple touches there, here and there. Same thing for Kerryon Johnson. I would expect to see Jason Huntley run ahead of Kerryon Johnson. Johnson maybe gets some red zone work, though. So that's the way that it lays out. Right now, it lays out that I think that your best running back plays are Zeke, Darrell Williams, Kenny Gainwell. I'm not looking to play 3 running backs on this slate. I don't think the slate is that powerful. GPP plays, I think Tony Pollard gets elevated to the better GPP play versus the Denver running backs personally. So that is where quarterback and wide receiver land. And look, I've mentioned, or quarterback and running back, I've mentioned that some interesting ways to build from a quarterback perspective, not to really play 3 running backs. And we'll get to wide receivers and definitely tight ends. This could easily be a double tight end slate, and we'll talk about that. Another way to get different on a 2-game slate, trying to win the $1 million. Before we do, sponsor of the program. The sponsor of the program is going to be PrizePicks.com. If you use the code SAL, you get a free bet up to $100. Tell your mother, your brother, your sister, your aunt, you have a nice sweat together at the games this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. You get some props in over-under props. It's a very simple game and very simple format. If you would like to take part in the community prop for this week, I have Noah Fant under 40.5 receiving yards. We'll touch on him when we get to tight ends. And I have Zeke over 44.5 rushing yards in this game. Zeke is getting healthier. Zeke is looking better. He's a favorite in this game with a nice total. Over 44.5 rushing yards. We really just need to get 10 to 12 touches out of Zeke for that to hit more times than not based on his efficiency metrics. So we take the over 44.5 rushing yards, Noah Fant under 40.5 receiving yards. You pair those together. You use the code SAL, your free bet up to $100. You tail the community prop, and we all hold hands on the weekend heading into the playoffs with a $1 Ruski, y'all. Use that code SAL to take advantage of it. Free bet up to $100. PrizePicks.com. To the wide receiver position we go. Up top, the most expensive player on this slate is Tyreek Hill at $8,000. And look, we're not really getting any price discount here. For the way that they're utilizing him right now, for the way that teams are taking away Tyreek and saying, you're not beating us. Tyreek coming off of a game with 10 targets, right? But, 10 targets, 13 targets in 2 of his last 3 games, but he's not seeing overall volume downfield. He had 145 air yards last week, the first time he cleared 100 since week 10 against Vegas, and a lot of that came on like a 65-yard pass that it was just broken up at the last second in their game this past weekend. If he brings that in, he has a 100-yard game, he gets the bonus. It looks like a lot better of a game than it actually was out there. So, this is somewhat of a concern right now for Tyreek Hill, right? You get at this steep price point. Last time out, Denver made it a priority to kind of take away the deep shot. You only saw Tyreek with 5 targets in that game, only 4.2 fantasy points, basically his worst performance of the entire season last time out against Denver. And they kind of sold out and said, yeah, we'll let Travis Kelce do whatever he wants underneath. We'll let these other guys have a couple of passes to the running back. We're not getting beat over the top. It's as simple as that. Now, that said, at $8,000, I do expect Tyreek to get people be scared off at the price tag. If you can afford Tyreek Hill, I'm all in on Tyreek Hill. Like $8,000 Tyreek, I understand the way that teams are playing the Chiefs, but we just saw Tyreek 2 weeks ago pick it up underneath a lot, 12 catches for 145 yards on under 100 air yards, and he ended up putting up 35 fantasy points in that game alone. So it doesn't have to happen from the deep shot, right? We've seen that earlier this season with a 12 catch and 11 catch game, right? He's had now 4 games of 10 plus or 11 plus catches on the year. So he doesn't have to have the deep shots, but I do think at this price tag with not much recent production in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I do think that you're going to see people be less on Tyreek Hill, and I think it gives us a nice leverage spot as a nice one-off since I'm not going to be too much on the Mahomes stacks. And that can always change, and we'll talk about it on Saturday morning. If indeed, if Mahomes is coming in as the 3rd highest owned quarterback, I'm going to go there. This is assuming that Mahomes is the most popular or the 2nd most popular quarterback. If he's coming in as the 3rd highest owned and only Drew Lock is lower owned on a 2-game slate, I'm going to end up pivoting to Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes stacks, which unlocks probably the highest overall combo ceiling on the slate when it does hit. Next up is these Cowboys guys. And look, they're really, I don't want to say struggling. The team is using the run a little bit more here. Now Michael Gallup is hurt, so we'll see what happens there. But Cedric Wilson checked in for 6 targets. They really are committed to these 3 wide receiver sets. We'll see if that's still the case now with Gallup out. But they spent a couple of weeks dealing around with Blake Jarwin and him not being out there, and they still try to go to 2 tight end sets to an extent. And then they said, screw it, we're going to go 3 wide receivers and just focus primarily on Dalton Schultz as our only tight end. And that's actually benefited them. And what that's doing is giving Dalton Schultz more looks. CeeDee Lamb over the last couple of games, even though he's playing all the snaps these last 2 games, he only has a combined 9 targets these last 2 games, and he only has a combined 7 receptions, barely crossing 100 yards during that time. He has not topped 66 receiving yards, and he's only topped it once since week 10. So the upside right now for these Cowboys guys, it is somewhat of a concern. Even if you go back to the matchup earlier this year where he saw Philadelphia, a lot of Steven Nelson in that game, he only had 3 catches on 3 targets in that game, right? A game where they get up ahead big. Zeke has a couple of early scores. So these Cowboys receivers, they're in play if you're going to go to Cowboys onslaughts, but I'm going to be more enticed to go up to Tyreek Hill if you find the extra $1,200 on this slate than I am to go to a CeeDee Lamb or an Amari Cooper. Now, if you're choosing between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, and clearly if you're going to be stacking Dak, you can throw this all out the window. The team that throws the 4th most in the league, you can go right back to Amari. Amari got back up to 90% of the snaps for the second time since week 8 when he was dealing with his rib injury. Amari is seeing consistent targets now, 2 red zone targets. He had another touchdown now in 3 out of 4 weeks. So Amari looks fine. I would prefer at this point, if ownership is similar, prefer Amari Cooper to a CeeDee Lamb. If ownership is different, I think CeeDee Lamb is the better overall receiver, so I would go there. So both of these Cowboys guys are in play. I would say they're not priorities for me though, but on a slate with not a lot of options at running back and overall a top heavy slate at wide receiver, like these first 3 names are really a big difference between the next couple of names. I would say that I lean more so to Tyreek Hill to pay up for. Nothing wrong with CeeDee Lamb and Amari. Currently my projections on CeeDee Lamb and Amari are to be the 2nd and 3rd highest projected wide receivers on the slate, but it's a little bit different when you start looking into the value that they can bring you relative to ceiling. This next guy is somebody that I like in GPPs. I like Devonta Smith in GPPs this week. I'm actually going to be, I would say, somewhat prioritizing him, especially if you go to Dallas stacks. Maybe you don't even want to stack at all. But Devonta Smith continues to be on the field. He's coming off of a game where he played 100% of the snaps, and there might not be any Dallas Goedert this week. Now, of course, he's going to have a big play. You can have big plays against this Cowboys defense. They'll make big plays of their own, but Devonta Smith now 3 straight games of over 90 air yards, crossing 100 last week. He just missed on a touchdown and just missed on another deep ball last week from Jalen Hurts. So his 3-catch, 54-yard day on 6 targets could have easily been 5 for 100 and a touchdown, and like he kind of did the week before against the Giants. So there is no doubt about it that on a team that does not throw all that much and likes to run the ball, although they're dealing with injuries, that Devonta Smith is overpriced on this slate. And I expect that at only $400 less than Amari Cooper, who's been way more consistent on the year and that offense has been, Devonta Smith is not going to be nearly as owned. He did not do well earlier in the season, the rookie, against Trevion Diggs, kind of bullied him around, a lot bigger of a cornerback in Diggs. So I'm hoping all of that packaged together kind of makes Devonta Smith the lowest owned of these top 4 receivers. And if that's the case, I mean, I have Devonta Smith only for like a point less than Amari and a point and a half less than CeeDee Lamb right now, and I would expect the ownership gap to be like 10 to 20% versus those guys. So I like Devonta Smith. You start to get to these next players on the slate. Jerry Jeudy, I'm expecting him and Tim Patrick to return from the C19 list. Hard to really like anybody here. I would say that Jerry Jeudy is my favorite. Sutton was the only dude out there last week. Saw a couple targets, some nice receptions, but I mean, Drew Lock just is not it. He's not it. This is going to be a tough defensive line, offensive line matchup for Drew Lock and the Denver Broncos. If they are all back and healthy now, and you add in Noah Fant to the mix, I think all these guys just kind of, it's whoever scores the touchdown. I think Jeudy in the slot has the best capability to, just for where Drew Lock is likely to be the most accurate. But for the most part, not really interested in these Denver guys. Maybe that leaves them lower owned. I would expect it to leave them lower owned. If there is a guy who can, quote unquote, break the slate with downfield usage, you would think that it's still the 6'3", 220-pound, 85th percentile speed score of Courtland Sutton, but we just have not seen it all season long, right? It is a smaller sample with Drew Lock, but dating back past seasons, he's never finished as a top 35 wide receiver. His 9 fantasy points last week, 3 catches, 60 yards on 5 targets, was the most fantasy points he scored since week 7. Those 9 fantasy points are literally the best he's done in the past 2 to 2.5 months. Now, the one thing that is encouraging, 126 air yards last week from Courtland Sutton in a game against the Chargers. So he was getting some downfield usage. The second time he's crossed 100 air yards in the last 3 weeks. So Sutton is an interesting GPP play. If we're talking strictly large field GPPs and not small field, I would say that Sutton and Devonta Smith are definitely going to be your lower owned, very high upside guys. If we go to the below $4,500 and below range, I'm not really interested in Tim Patrick and his return all that much. Just an outside receiver, not as talented as Sutton, and I'm just not expecting big things there at 4,500. That's basically it. I think he's going to be the 4th option in this game for a run-first offense. Cedric Wilson at least has to be mentioned. Cedric Wilson is a guy who never really popped off. He had a couple of these like low-volume games, but was just finding the end zone earlier in the season when Michael Gallup was hurt. Now Michael Gallup is out with an ACL tear, they're saying. So Cedric Wilson is going to slide in as the wide receiver 3. He did last week. He actually ran a lot of routes, and he saw 6 targets on those routes. He ended up running 20 routes after Michael Gallup got hurt a quarter into the game. 6 targets. He scores a touchdown. He gets 19 fantasy points, and when people click on the box score and see that, I think people are going to crowd to Cedric Wilson. Cedric Wilson will be overowned this week. I still like him. There's not a lot of secure value in this range for guys that are going to run 25 to 30 routes with a good quarterback and high passing volume on their team for the most part this year. I mean, to be completely honest with you, Cedric Wilson is probably one of the only 2 on the slate. The next guy up is as well. So Wilson at $4,200, he's in play. He's not going to become a very strong priority, yes, because look, he's still the 4th option in this passing game, and they're probably going to play ahead and run the ball with Tony Pollard and Zeke. Zeke. So that doesn't get me that excited. He had 6 targets on 20 routes last week. That is nowhere near sustainable when you're running next to Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz. Cedric Wilson, earlier in the season when he was playing ahead of, or when Michael Gallup was hurt, I mean, he had one game of 7 targets and he had a decent game there, but then you're relying on touchdowns, right? 3 catches, 84 yards on 3 targets, 2 catches on 5 targets, 4 catches on 7 targets, right? He had the big game on Thanksgiving, 7 catches for 104 yards, but that was without Amari Cooper and without CeeDee Lamb, right? So it's a totally different story. When you see CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper both out there, Cedric Wilson is lucky to see 4 or 5 targets. Those 6 targets on 20 routes last week, I'm not expecting that again. So when you're in this range and you're looking at Cedric Wilson, I just say, why not Byron Pringle? Why not Byron Pringle, who is cheaper? Why not Byron Pringle, who likely becomes the 3rd option in his passing game behind Tyreek and Kelce, who has a higher team total, who's starting to develop a connection, the 6'1", 205-pound bigger receiver with speed, 77th percentile or 79th percentile speed score, according to Player Profiler. His team throws the 2nd most times in the NFL, and he's still seeing volume, right? He's seen 4, 7, and 4 targets over these last 3 games. He's still running a good amount of routes. He's probably going to play 50 to 60% of the snaps. He's going to have a very, very similar role to what Cedric Wilson is going to have, except he's 3rd in the pecking order. Cedric Wilson is 4th in the pecking order, and he's probably going to come in with maybe even half the ownership of Cedric Wilson. So if we're talking GPPs here, I think that Byron Pringle is a nice leverage off of what is likely to be a higher owned Cedric Wilson. Quez Watkins is there. He's going to maybe have 1 deep shot in the game to pay off for you. He's in play for GPPs. McCole Hardman, I'm not interested in. Only ran like 11 routes last week. That's not that enticing. Operated as the wide receiver 4. 1 big catch. Demarcus Robinson stays in play. The dude is not great. He's out there because he's a veteran, knows his role. He can block well, but he ran 24 routes. He's back up to operating as the quote-unquote second receiver, although I think it's still Pringle who ran 20 routes last week. He's not flashy. He's not sexy, but if you're trying to build a Kansas City stack with, let's just say, even Kelce and Tyreek can go all out with Mahomes, fitting in a 3rd guy to get a triple stack to be even more unique at $3,400, it's not a bad bet. I would try and go to Pringle if you can afford it. I think just a better athlete, but it's not terrible. These rest of these wide receivers below here, Greg Ward maybe sees a target. Noah Brown only played 4 snaps last week once Michael Gallup went out, ran 2 routes. Might go up a little bit, but like I mentioned earlier, they're trying to go to more 3 wide receiver sets and not 2 tight end sets, which Noah Brown was getting on the field more for because he's a good blocker when they're trying to run. But in 3 wide receiver sets, he's just not going to get on the field that much more. Maybe even Malik Turner sees more snaps in him, but not expecting much there, and don't really care about Josh Gordon all that much. 8 routes last week, not downfield usage. Maybe scores a red zone touchdown. That's like his biggest upside at most, but I'd rather go to other guys who are going to have more routes and more opportunity. So that's where wide receiver is. I think like in terms of leverage where guys will be lower owned than they should, I'm thinking Tyreek Hill, Byron Pringle, Devonta Smith, Cortland Sutton. So that's like your leverage plays. Some of them don't feel good when you put them in your lineup, but those are the guys that are lower owned. If they hit, they're going to be the reason you win GPPs. Guys who will have ownership on them and just look like fine plays this week. I mean, basically all the Dallas receivers. The way that you pair Dallas up together with Dak is a way to get unique, but they're all going to have ownership. They're all underpriced. They have the flashy name. They're always on Fox Sports in primetime windows, right? Just like they will be for this one. So that gives me a little bit of pause. And when I say Dak Prescott looks good this week, that's why stacking him up with 3 or 4 guys from his own team is the way to kind of get unique there, because I do think they will be the highest owned team this week. The more that I talk through this, the more that, hey, if Patrick Mahomes is going to be low owned, yeah, you can be damn sure that Byron Pringle is going to be leverage off of Cedric Wilson, Tyreek leverage off of all the Dallas receivers, start to go there, one off Devonta Smith, one off Sutton. Like, it starts to become a very unique lineup. Don't you steal my lineup out there. Let's go into the tight end position. Tight end for me this week is very simple. Like Dallas Goedert's on the COVID list. If he is not able to play, Tyree Jackson, a former college quarterback who's a big, huge body out there, athletic, was solid in the preseason before getting hurt. He would fill in with Richard Rodgers, with maybe Jason Crome if he's even going to be out there. So that's basically where that potential news story can go. But if Dallas Goedert is out there, I mean, you have a really good slate of tight ends. Obviously, Kelce, Schultz, who is very much so involved in this offense, if not the favorite and / like new security blanket for Mr. Dak Prescott. And you're also seeing Schultz have success earlier in the year against this Eagles team. He was a massive mismatch that they exploited. Would not be shocked to see them go right back to that. The way that I'm looking at the slate right now is these 2 tight ends up top, and Travis Kelce and Dalton Schultz are the dudes that I want. Like, I'm okay to double stack these guys. Like, Travis Kelce right now is the same price as the Dallas receivers, and for the most part, right? And I prefer him. I just prefer Travis Kelce. It's as simple as that. Better game environment. I think he's going to have the better matchup in terms of underneath stuff against Denver. You saw him have 8 targets in that game against Denver the last time that this Chiefs offense was like really broken before they got to face Vegas again. But I mean, he's just producing at this point, right? Continues to see red zone targets, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. You know how good Travis Kelce is, and I just like the fact that if you just look at him across positions, he's basically the second most owned or priced wide receiver, but only a couple $100 more than Amari and CeeDee Lamb, and I just prefer him at this point. So I like the idea of double tight ends. I prioritize Kelce on this slate, as many people probably will. And the double tight end I would go to with him is Dalton Schultz. Even if Goddard is in, I prefer Dalton Schultz slightly. I think there's more passing volume there. I like the ability for them to exploit that matchup a little bit better. And Dalton Schultz has just been the guy since they decided to go to more 3 wide receiver sets and less 2 tight end sets. 8+ targets in 3 straight games. He's had 21, 22, and 11.5 fantasy points over the last 3 games. And he's coming off of a game where he played 95% of the snaps, the second most snaps he's played on the entire year, running 27 routes. He's basically operating as like their, honestly, wide receiver 1 over the past month and a half. He's ran 27 or more routes in every single game dating back to week 5 against the Giants, where he only ran, quote unquote, or a pause. He's only ran 25 routes that week, right? So, I mean, still running routes. So, this dude is legit. I think Dalton Schultz is an amazing play. Stacking Dalton Schultz with Travis Kelce, or playing them both together, I guess you can say. You're not really stacking, but double tight end is where I'm trying to go with. I think that's a very unique way to approach the slate. Yes, Dallas Goedert, if he's able to clear the COVID-19 stuff, is still in play. Big thing to also point out that Zach Ertz scored a touchdown against the Cowboys earlier this year. He was still on the team during that time, so that's another guy to take out. Helps Dallas Goedert, helps Devonta Smith in terms of target share stuff and just overall setting up your play calling for this game. So that's another just little thing to put out there as well. Ertz was still on this team when they last played. But I mean, look, even in Goddard's best games, the team is running 20 to 24 routes. Even in games where they get down by 10, they're still trying to run the ball. They're trying to keep the game close, slow the pace of the game down. So, I mean, the more that I talk, the more that Kansas City has low owned and just onslaught them looks even better. So if you're asking me to choose a double tight end build, it would be Dalton Schultz and Travis Kelce. That said, Goddard, if he's able to clear, is in play. I'm not on Noah Fant this week. I'm sorry. Noah Fant, I know he had his best game of the year last week, but they're getting Jerry Jeudy back. They're going to get Tim Patrick back. This team wants to run the ball as much as they possibly can. I don't care if Noah Fant can still have a decent game, but the fact that he's now priced next to Dalton Schultz, who has a secure role in his offense, Dallas Goedert, who if he comes back, has a secure role as the number 1 option in his offense, right? Dalton Schultz, we already said, is basically the number 1 option in Dallas's offense the last month and a half. I'm just not that interested in going to Noah Fant, who only saw a spike last week because 2 wide receivers were out in that game. So I'm off of Noah Fant, and once you get to that point, I'm not on Noah Fant. I'm not on any of these backup tight ends unless Tyree Jackson was to play. We can at least look at him as a punt play at 2,500, the athletic tight end, but that's about it. I think that a very unique way to approach this slate is a couple things. You can onslaught one of these teams that you want to stack up, right? Whether it's Kansas City or Dallas, the only 2 teams I'm interested in stacking. You can go Jalen Hurts naked and onslaught the opposite side of that game. If you have like 4 Cowboys and 1 Jalen Hurts, nobody's going to be building those lineups, right? They're going to get at least another Eagles playmaker in there. Not playing running backs in the flex is, I think, probably going to be a popular way to go about it, but it's still something I like. And then, yes, double tight ends, and specifically Kelce and Dalton Schultz, high volume guys, red zone target guys. I think that's probably where a winning lineup is going to come from, $1 million lineup. Thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate you all a ton. If you want to use the code SAL right now, tell your mother, your brother, whoever you're hanging out with the games with, they get a free $100 as well. Use the code SAL on prizepicks.com, a free $100 to bet with. We had the prop earlier. And if you want to use any of the tools I've referenced, projection, ownership, rankings, optimizer, all that stuff is all linked down below on my Patreon. You can check it all out to help you get closer to winning a GPP or to winning the $1 million contest. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you all in the next one, and we'll be live Saturday before these games starts. Peace out, gang.